you really see Suge and Ice Cube fight?
Also, I see a ruckus, and I just see, Cube, but Cube's throwing his fists. He wasn't punking out at all.
If he didn't know he got poked, then the conspiracy lives on.
Would you put it past Suge?
A lot of people still see Ice Cube as just another gangster rapper, but the truth is he wasn't just rapping about the streets, he really lived it. And one of the first people to learn that lesson the hard way was none other than Suge Knight himself. This was the same Ice Cube who had no problem throwing hands in public, even at conventions, just to prove nobody could play with him. From going toe-to-toe with Suge in a straight-up fistfight to boldly speaking his mind whenever his name came up, Cube never backed down. That's what made the whole Ice Cube versus Suge Knight dynamic so wild. Suge Knight might have been known as the boogeyman of hip-hop, with artists literally terrified to cross his path.
They was not scared of Suge Knight. They was terrified of Suge Knight.
Right.
I mean, terrified.
I know.
No. To death.
But Cube was one of the rare few who wasn't scared in the slightest. Over the years, plenty of people tried to question Cube's street credibility, acting like he was just some rapper pretending to be a gangster. But the truth? Cube was one of the lucky ones who managed to escape the streets alive, and he's got stories that prove just how close he came to throwing it all away. One incident he shared is proof enough. There was this local guy deep in the drug game who showed up at Cube's house, tricking his own mom with lies just to get some money. Shockingly, she gave the man $20.
I was heavy on drugs, went around to my house and gave my mother some cockamamie story. So she gave him $20.
That moment sent Cube into a rage like never before. Furious, Cube and a friend grabbed their guns and rolled up to the guy's house, ready to end him right then and there. But fate had other plans. The man wasn't home. Looking back, Cube admitted it was a blessing in disguise, because if that door had opened, Ice Cube said himself he wouldn't even be alive today, let alone the legend we all know now.
And I was so mad. You violated me and my family. Me and my friends was going around the corner to kill him, and he wasn't home. So thank God. We were young and we was mad, and we had a weapon, and it was gonna happen. So it would have been stupid, and I wouldn't be sitting here if it did happen.
One of the biggest reasons Ice Cube managed to walk away from the streets was his father. Unlike a lot of his peers who grew up without that kind of guidance, Cube had a strong father figure who kept him grounded and pushed him toward a better path. Combine that with the Doors music opened for him, and Cube had a way out.
Grew up in a pretty tough neighborhood, but nobody was tougher than my father, so it was a sense of security.
But leaving the streets never meant losing his backbone, and that's exactly why even Suge Knight, the most feared man in hip-hop, had to face Cube head-on. DJ Premier even shared a story about seeing Cube and Suge squaring up in real life, and the energy was insane.
Do you really see Suge and Ice Cube fight?
Also, I see a ruckus, and I just see, Cube, but Cube's throwing his fists. He wasn't punking out at all.
This went down right after Cube split from NWA, when Suge was already carving out his reputation as the industry's most dangerous man. But according to Premier, Cube stood tall and wasn't backing down for a second. That says everything, because at that time, Suge had the entire music game terrified. We're talking about a guy who didn't just run his mouth. Suge followed through on every threat. He extorted artists, rolled with real gangsters, and made sure people knew he wasn't playing around.
Suge Knight is a mythical figure.
The controversial CEO of Death Row Records, the most feared figure in all of hip-hop.
His size was intimidating.
Knight had been on probation for a 1992 assault on 2 aspiring rappers.
Just ask Jerry Heller, one of the most infamous figures in NWA's history. Heller once described Suge as pure evil. And Heller had every reason to feel that way. During the messy contract battle with Dr. Dre, Mob James, one of Suge's top enforcers, revealed that when they pulled up demanding Dre's release from Ruthless Records, Jerry Heller froze in fear. The man was literally stuck in his chair, unable to move an inch. But it didn't stop there. Not long after, Heller's house was broken into. His things were stolen, and the chilling part? a message spray painted on his own mirror. Nobody could prove it was Suge's crew, but Heller was absolutely convinced. From that point on, the man was paranoid out of his mind. Just hearing Suge's name was enough to send him into a panic attack. Albert Hughes, one half of the Hughes brothers who directed Menace II Society, once revealed just how deep Jerry Heller's paranoia ran. Albert said he casually dropped Suge Knight's name as a joke, and Jerry's reaction was insane. He literally pulled a gun on Albert's brother out of sheer panic. That's the level of fear Suge had burned into him, and Heller wasn't the only one. Suge had the entire music industry under his thumb, using intimidation like it was second nature. But Ice Cube, he was cut from a different cloth. Cube wasn't somebody Suge could just scare into silence, and that's what made him stand out in an era where most kept their heads down. Cube had dealt with his share of beefs too, proving he wasn't afraid of confrontation. Take his feud with Above the Law, for example. After Cube left NWA, Eazy-E signed the Pomona-based group, and naturally they inherited the tension with Cube. Things started boiling in 1990 while Above the Law was promoting their debut album, Livin' Like Hustlers. During an LA Times interview that April, group member Cocaine threw some shade at Cube's image, questioning if Cube was really built for the streets.
Me and Cube had some issues. He disrespected Pomona. Me and him got into a head-up scrap, spilled over to the New Music Seminar. We had an interview with LA Times. What signature is y'all music and everything? So like we talk about what we really was involved with or our college.
He claimed Cube's hardcore lyrics weren't coming from his own experiences, but were actually inspired by their lifestyle. According to him, Cube hustled the street, never banged in the streets. Cube didn't take the jab lightly. He clapped back with a slick shot of his own, saying, "New G's from Pomona should only talk about the 10 freeway." A sharp reference to the highway running through their city. That was Cube's way of shutting down the disrespect while keeping it clever.
Like Ice Cube that went away to college and come back and act like this big time gangster in NWA, which at the time, that's what he was. You know, he was a dude that was really sharp with the pen, was kind of a schoolboy, never hustled the street, never banged in the street. LA Times wanted to reply to that. On the interview, he said New Jack Pomona should only talk about the freeway because that's the only thing that's going through that mother.
And of course, Eazy-E couldn't resist adding gasoline to the fire. As soon as that interview dropped, he called up Cold 187 the leader of Above the Law, and stirred the pot with one simple question. Did you read the paper? Once 187 saw it, he was heated and ready for war. Cold 187 wasn't bluffing. He told Zai straight up that he was going to put hands on Ice Cube. Zai tried to calm him down, but 187 wasn't listening to reason. His mind was already set on confrontation.
Eazy-E called me. He said, "Hey man, did you get the LA Times?" I said, "No, man, you gotta see it." He laughing on the phone. He's a big joke, so he laughing. Ah! So I get it. I read the statement. I call E back and said, "I'm your boy up." As soon as I see, "Oh, cuz, don't be tripping." I said, "Man, that." Real, homie.
And as fate would have it, the chance came fast. That very same night, April 7th, 1990, Above the Law was headlining a show at the Anaheim Celebrity Theater, while Cube was backstage in the hallway giving a magazine interview. Suddenly, Cube and 187 crossed paths. They traded a few words, nothing too wild, but you could feel the tension buzzing in the air. Later that night, Cube decided to step into Above the Law's dressing room and confront 187 at the doorway. That was all it took. Boom! A fight exploded right then and there.
So he come, made a meet up in the hallway, said, "What's up there?" She said, "Newspaper. You trying to play me like a buster or something, homie?" Like, you a dude. Like I said, "What's happening? You want to get down?" So he come back into my dressing room and say, "What's up?" As soon as he say, "What's up?" I give him to him a 2-piece hot wind. Boom, he fall through the door.
It wasn't just some quick scuffle either. It was a rough, gritty brawl. But Cube wasn't backing down for a second. He held his ground and made sure 187 couldn't overpower him.
So Cube didn't back down either.
No, he didn't. He didn't back down. He got socked out, but he didn't back down. He got socked out, but he didn't back down.
The fight ended, but the smoke didn't clear. By then, Cube wasn't rolling solo anymore. He had his own squad, the Lynch Mob. And these weren't just rappers spitting bars. They were street dudes, activists, and straight up soldiers you did not want to cross.
We see each other going to a panel, right? And then we face off right in the middle of the seminar, and we get down. And all hell broke loose.
So when Cube and Above the Law crossed paths again at the Marriott Marquis in Times Square for the 1990 New Music Seminar, things got ugly all over again.
Cube was nowhere around. nowhere around. He tore that whole floor up.
This time, Cube had stepped away to speak on a panel, but his crew was still in the building. Words were exchanged, tempers blew up, and before long, fists were flying. Another all-out brawl broke out between the lynch mob and Above the Law, shaking the whole scene. By the end of it, Cube's side made their point loud and clear. They weren't the ones to test. After that, Cube seemed almost unfazed, because he had already reinforced one thing that couldn't be denied. Ice Cube was not to be messed with, period. And then came one of Ice Cube's most surprising feuds, his beef with Common. On September 27, 1994, a young rapper still going by Common Sense dropped a track that would shake the culture and spark some serious drama. The song I Used to Love, H.E.R., was the breakout single from his second album, Resurrection. In it, Common used the metaphor of a woman he fell in love with to describe his relationship with hip-hop. But as the story unfolds, the girl clearly represents the music itself. The track was instantly embraced, especially by the picky East Coast crowd who hadn't been too impressed with Common's debut, Can I Borrow $1? But while East Coast heads were vibing with Common's clever storytelling, not everyone was clapping for him. The song painted hip-hop's evolution from its raw beginnings to its shift into something more commercial and gangsta-influenced. For Common, it was just reflection. But for Ice Cube, it felt like a shot fired at the West Coast's dominance in the 90s. And Cube wasn't about to let that slide.
Created I Used to Love It in 1994. You know, it was a story that I could tell about the evolution of hip-hop. And the stages that I seen hip-hop go from just the pure innocence.
He talking about this girl that he was in love with. You know, she's supposed to be hip-hop. He's so in love with her. But when she go out here, she get
Things really escalated when Common heard through the grapevine that Cube had clapped back on Wax. King T pointed him toward Cube's verse on Mac 10's West Side Slaughterhouse featuring Cube and WC. That's when Common decided to fire back full force, and the feud was officially born.
King T from the West Coast, like somebody said, yo, Cube dissed you on this song. So we playing the song, and I'm listening, I'm like, damn, this.
Common came out swinging with a diss track that didn't hold back. He spit lines like, went from gangsta to Islam to the D of Da-FX, calling out Cube for pandering to East Coast fans, only to turn his back later. He pushed even harder with, hypocrite, I'm filling out your death certificate, slinging bean pies and saint. Ides in the same sentence, accusing Cube of being at odds with the Nation of Islam's values while still promoting street life. And to top it off, Common ended the track with the ultimate mic drop. He threw Cube's own lyrics back at him, saying in Cube's immortal words, AB is AB. That was a bold move that sent shockwaves through hip-hop. For Ice Cube, this was uncharted territory. He had long been feared as one of the most ruthless diss track artists in the game. His brutal takedown of NWA with No Vaseline was already a hip-hop classic, cementing his rep as somebody you just didn't test. As producer Doug Infinite once put it, if you're going to come at Cube lyrically, you better come with it or he's going to body you. That's exactly why Common, being the lyricist he was, dared to step up. Cube later admitted that he had actually written a response track ready to fire back at Common.
I had a record, man, that was a killer. And then we ended up having this summit with Farrakhan.
Oh.
He helped us squash it. He helped us squash it, so I just never did my record.
You recorded it?
No, I had to.
But fate had other plans. Before things could spiral, tragedy struck the entire culture. The deaths of Tupac Shakur in 1996 and the notorious B.I.G. in 1997 cast a dark shadow over hip-hop. And suddenly the game realized beef wasn't worth blood. On April 3rd, 1997, less than a month after Biggie's death, Minister Louis Farrakhan organized a historic peace summit at the Nation of Islam's headquarters in Chicago. Heavyweights from across the industry showed up, and among them were none other than Ice Cube and Common. It was the moment that squashed the feud before it could explode any further. But peace with Common didn't mean Cube was done with drama. Far from it. Next up came the infamous feud between Ice Cube and his old crew, NWA. As most fans know, Cube had left the group in 1989 over money disputes. He felt he wasn't being paid fairly for all the writing he did on Straight Outta Compton, and that ugly fallout split the group apart. This beef got so ugly that it even dragged in people who weren't directly involved. One shocking example is Dee Barnes, the host of the Fox TV show Pump It Up, which covered hip-hop culture and regularly featured rap's biggest names. Years later, Eminem even referenced her in Guilty Conscience when rapping about Dr. Dre's notorious attack. But back when Cube's drama with NWA was at its peak, Dee Barnes was already in the middle of it all. She had interviewed the group plenty of times, knew their dynamic, and often gave them airtime. But once Cube left, everything shifted. NWA fired back hard with their diss track 100 Miles and Runnin', making it clear they weren't letting him leave without consequences. According to Dee herself, when she got the group back on Pump It Up to promote their latest moves, the vibe was already tense from the jump. The air was thick with hostility, and everyone knew the Cube situation was about to boil over. Every single question Dee Barnes asked during that NWA interview turned into another jab at Ice Cube. Things got so heated that the production team had to cut out entire chunks just to make the episode even airable. But here's where everything went left. When the episode finally aired, it didn't just show NWA's segment. It also included a clip filmed earlier on the set of Boys and the Hood with Yo-Yo, Ice Cube's close friend and collaborator. And out of nowhere, Cube crashed the interview, then flipped the script by using NWA's own lyrics to diss them on camera. To make matters worse, Cube even took shots at the DOC, who was tight with Dr. Dre and had just been in a devastating car accident that left his voice permanently damaged. It was cold and bold at the same time, and it poured gasoline on a fire that was already burning hot. For the record, Dee Barnes herself later admitted she thought that segment should never have aired, but she was just the presenter. She had no control over the final edit. Unfortunately, the producers went for maximum drama, cutting the footage together to make it look like Dee was feeding the beef. After Cube's disses aired, Dee looked into the camera and said she was always in the middle of controversy. In reality, it was probably just a reflex to the awkward situation, but in the edit, it looked like she was stirring the pot and putting herself right in the middle of Cube versus NWA. That moment would come back to haunt her. Sometime later, at a Def Jam Records party, Dee Barnes and Dr. Dre crossed paths again, and this time, things turned violent. Dre, drunk and still furious over how the interview was presented, snapped in a blind rage. According to Rolling Stone reporter Alan Light in the article, Beating Up the Charts, Dre grabbed Dee by the hair and repeatedly slammed her head and the right side of her body against a brick wall near the stairway. While this was happening, his bodyguard blocked the crowd with a gun, making sure nobody could step in.
They grabbed me by my hair and started slamming me up against the wall. It's a painful and traumatic experience.
Dre even tried to throw her down the stairs, but when that failed, he continued the assault, kicking her in the ribs and hands. It was a shocking and brutal moment that showed just how far the fallout from that interview had spiraled. Dee Barnes eventually managed to break free and ran into the women's restroom, but Dre wasn't finished. He followed her inside, yanked her by the hair yet again, and started punching her in the back of the head. It was vicious, relentless, and impossible for anyone around to ignore. And the wildest part, members of NWA openly talked about the assault in later interviews. MC Ren straight up said she deserved it, while Eazy-E backed him up, saying, yeah, she had it coming. Even Dre himself showed zero remorse, brushing it off like nothing. He said, people talk all this ish, but you know, somebody mess with me, I'm gonna mess with them. I just did it. Ain't nothing you can do now by talking about it. Besides, it ain't no big thing. I just threw her through a door. That cold response only made the whole situation more disturbing. Dee Barnes later filed a $22.75 million lawsuit against Dr. Dre, but the case was eventually settled out of court. Still, the incident stuck to Dre's name for years, and it showed just how explosive and dangerous the fallout from Cube's feud with NWA really got. But Cube wasn't slowing down his trail of conflicts. In fact, another feud was brewing, this time with Cypress Hill, and it all started with the Friday movie soundtrack, which Cube personally curated. One of the highlight songs was Cypress Hill's Roll It Up, Light It Up, Smoke It Up, a track the group had agreed to hand over. But according to Be Real, the real drama didn't begin until Cube heard another joint while hanging in their studio. During the session, Cypress Hill played him a sneak peek from their upcoming album, Temples of Boom, their soon-to-be single, Throw Your Set in the Air. Cube loved it instantly and pushed to have it on the Friday soundtrack. But the group turned him down, reminding him it was their lead single and couldn't be given away. Cube pressed them again, even asked to hear it a second time, but they still stood firm. That track was off limits.
We play him the song and he likes it. He goes, yeah, that's perfect, you know. Me and Muggs ask him, hey man, we got a couple of tracks from the album, you want to hear it?
We played him a song called Throw Your Set in the Air. And he's like, oh, that's bang. Can I get that for the movie instead?
They're like, man, we'd love to give it to you, but this is gonna be
Fast forward to the release of the Friday soundtrack, which dropped just before Temples of Boom. That's when the drama really hit. A friend of Be Real called him up saying, "Did you let Ice Cube use one of your album tracks for Friday?" Be Real was confused and explained that they only gave Cube Roll It Up, Light It Up, Smoke It Up. But his friend wasn't talking about that. He was talking about a track that sounded suspiciously like Throw Your Set in the Air. At first, Be Real didn't want to believe it, but once he listened to Ice Cube's track, his heart dropped. The hook sounded almost identical to Throw Your Set in the Air, with only a few words switched up. To him, it felt like Cube had straight up jacked their song. Feeling betrayed, Be Real vented his frustration in the studio, and word traveled fast, eventually making its way back to Cube through Mac 10. Cube tried to smooth things over, calling Be Real to hash it out. He claimed it was just a misunderstanding, and for a moment it seemed like the matter might die down. But then came the breaking point. Cube later invited Be Real to the studio to lay down a guest vocal for Caution, a group signed to Lynch Mob Records. During the session, Be Real overheard a few lines from a song that sounded eerily close to lyrics off Temples of Boom. He was stunned. Was Cube trying to swipe from them again? Be Real swore Cube caught his reaction because when Cube stepped out and came back, those suspicious lines were suddenly gone. For Be Real, that was all the proof he needed. Cube had been caught red-handed twice. That was the final straw. Be Real went back to his crew, told them everything, and Cypress Hill decided it was time to clap back. The group dropped No Rest for the Wicked, a brutal diss track aimed directly at Ice Cube. From there, it was on, both sides firing off diss records and the feud spreading like wildfire. The beef grew deeper and fans started picking sides while the LA rap scene, already tense, felt the pressure heating up even more. And just as that war raged on, Cube found himself tangled in yet another conflict, this time with local artists Cam and Solo. The drama peaked when Cube and Solo unexpectedly crossed paths at a Los Angeles traffic light. According to Solo, the run-in quickly turned violent, and he claimed he got the upper hand in the fight. In the chaos, Cube's chain ended up in Solo's possession, a humiliation that only poured more gasoline on Cube's growing list of enemies.
Back up, whooped on his ass. Somehow his chain fell in my hand. I don't know how it got in my hand, but...
Somehow his chain fell in my hand. I don't know how it got in my hand, but it fell in my hand. That's how Solo described the infamous fight with Ice Cube, and he wasn't about to let that victory slip quietly into the night. Solo showed up at a Cypress Hill concert at the House of Blues, lifted Cube's chain high above the crowd, and the audience went crazy. The place erupted, and the moment was immortalized in a photo that spread everywhere. It was humiliation for Cube, a symbolic moment that turned into pure street legend. Still, after all the chaos, the back and forth disses, and the fight spilling into the streets, the beef was finally squashed. It marked the end of one of the wildest and most intense rivalries in West Coast rap history. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe for more. And don't go anywhere. The next video popping up on your screen has even more explosive celebrity drama waiting for you. See you there.